Welcome to ILTV's Israel Daily. I'm Aaron Porras, and coming up in today's newscast, Jerusalem, one of the areas in Israel hit hardest by the coronavirus, finally starts to flatten the curve. Animal rights activists call for meat to be relabeled as a public health hazard in the wake of the virus's impact, and Israeli politicians get closer and closer to finalizing a landmark unity coalition. Israel is continuing to see a downwards trend in the new cases of the coronavirus, despite having rolled back regulations significantly. Right now, over 16,285 people have been diagnosed with COVID-19 in Israel, and over 10,460 have recovered. 91 of those diagnosed are in serious condition, though, with 70 of them on ventilators. And the death toll has now risen to 238. But the good news is that a mere 43 new cases have been confirmed in Israel in the last 24 hours. And even better, Jerusalem, which has been Israel's most infected city, is now flattening the curve. Following a series of lockdowns, the infection rate has dropped down to just 15 cases per 10,000 people. And despite the positive trend, Israel isn't going to restart education in Jerusalem's ultra-Orthodox schools anytime soon, where communities have been hardest hit. But it does look like the Western Wall has now been reopened to the public. For the last few weeks, only 10 to 19 worshippers could be at the holy site at any given time. But now up to 300 people will be able to enter the Western Wall Plaza at the same time, as long as they wear masks and properly socially distance. Meanwhile, restrictions may be easing, but the Israeli government is remaining vigilant in preventing the spread of the COVID-19 virus, even if it means the continued tracking of civilians.
אני מבין את הפגיעה בפרטיות, אבל להערכתי, אולי אני טועה, בסדר, להערכתי, אנשים רוצים לדעת שיש חשש גדול שהם היו בקרבת אדם עם קורונה, ואם היו עושים סקר כללי, לשאול בן אדם היה רוצה לקבל SMS מהכלי הזה, הוא לא היה רואה בזה פגיעה בפרטיות, היה אומר, וואלה, תגידו לי, אני לא רוצה להדביק את המשפחה שלי.
In a controversial move, the Israeli government has now reauthorized the use of anti-terror surveillance technology to track individuals infected with COVID-19. And the Shin Bet security services who operate this mission also then inform anyone who may have come in contact with these people. So far, at least 7% of Israelis notified by the Shin Bet that they may have been exposed have tested positive for the virus. But of course, many are still opposed to the plan, as the technology is meant to track terrorists. So the use of it on unsuspecting civilians is seen as a massive breach of trust and personal privacy laws.
כרגע, אני חושב שצריך להפסיק מיד את השימוש בכלי. אני חושב שגם את תהליך החקיקה אין צורך בו, ויפה שעה אחת קודם.
Still, the surveillance project has been approved for use until May 26th, during which time the cabinet is also expected to present a draft bill to regulate the surveillance of the public. And the public will then have just 1 week to comment on the bill before it's submitted for final Knesset approvals. Well, now that the coronavirus infection rate is going down, starting tomorrow, malls, open-air markets, and parks will officially be open to the public. Also, the Israeli government is rolling back several other regulations, but there's still lots of confusion as to what businesses are allowed to open and where the public can actually go. So joining us now to break down how all of this is being decided is Dr. Vili Abraham, ILTV contributor and consumer behavior expert. So, first off, what businesses are allowed to start functioning starting tomorrow?
So tomorrow, malls are expected to open, and of course, all businesses operating in outdoor shopping centers. However, just around the corner, we'll have other businesses opening. For example, gyms will open by the end of the week. By the end of the month, swimming pools will be able to open, so we can go back swimming. Museums by the middle of May. However, shows and all sorts of entertainment related to, entertainment that requires a lot of people to sit in the same place will not open, unfortunately, according to details that we can see now, until the middle of June. So most businesses will open very soon.
All right, well, so now I want to talk a little bit about the bailouts, because the government says that it's providing millions of shekels to various, big companies and things like that. But some analysts believe that startups in particular should not be getting any money because any loan program would primarily benefit the investors and its founders rather than the employees who are most at risk. Do you agree?
Well, I would disagree, and I think that if the government can fund and give grants to the high-tech industry and make sure that the funding goes to workers who are employed, and I think it's fairly simple to do, it will not go to the investors. And we have to remember that the high-tech industry is a very significant component in the Israeli economy. It employs about 10% of all people. The rate of growth as far as exports are concerned is 3 times as much as all other industries. And when somebody buys a high-tech company, you know, all the time we hear about mergers and acquisitions, that contributes 5% to GDP. Wow. So it's a very, very significant component in the economy, and I really disagree with that.
All right, now what about the 200 big business owners that have been putting massive pressure on the government to get more financial support for themselves and to be allowed to function in public spaces like malls? Will they get their demands?
Well, according to estimates, they will not be getting all their demands, but at least 60% of it they will be getting. And what they're actually asking, they're asking for support in returning workers back to stores, because the assessment is that at least in the first few weeks when business go back to work, a lot of people are not going to be flocking to stores because remember, there are still a lot of people unemployed. Mm-hmm. Spending is assessed to be decreasing significantly. And one of the major things that they're requesting is that the government annuls the exemption from a $75 exemption on VAT if you buy things online. So they're trying to attract more people to their stores and prevent them from buying as much online.
I see. All right. Now, my final question, real quick. Small businesses are also asking for some bailout money. What is the process that they have to go through?
Well, the process they have to go to is actually they either go to the government offices or they do it online. But it does take some time. However, if you watch the press conference that Bibi had a few days ago, he says that they're going to make it a lot quicker, and it's going to be just like doing it in the United States, meaning you'll be able to fill out forms online and get things automatically.
All right, Vili, thank you so much for joining us again. It's great to see you.
It's a pleasure.
All right, animal rights activists want the COVID-19 outbreak to serve as a warning around eating meat, and they're calling on international bodies to label animal products as dangerous to public health. ILTV's Natasha Kirchuk has the details.
Israeli activist Adit Romano works to save animals from slaughter. Now she's launched a petition appealing to the United Nations and World Health Organization to slap a hazard warning on all meat products, just like the ones that you see on cigarettes and food products that are high in sugar and fat. Romano is the co-founder of Israel's only rescue and educational sanctuary for mostly disabled animals. And she says former disease outbreaks highlight the dangers associated with the animal food industry.
And we want to remind that birds flu, pigs flu, mad cow was only the beginning if we won't stop eating animals.
Now, despite claims that coronavirus came from eating a bat at the Wuhan wet markets in China, its source is still a mystery. But Romano, for her part, says a move like this could prevent another disaster.
This period of the COVID-19 and the coronavirus crisis, and out of our belief that in every problem there is an opportunity, we launch a petition. And the cause of the petition is to demand to prevent the next pandemic.
So far, the petition has generated 3,000 signatures, but they're hoping for at least 50,000. And it's not just activists fighting against the animal food industry. Israel's agriculture ministry is under fire, with a state comptroller report claiming the ministry is failing to investigate horrific claims of negligence surrounding the import of livestock to the country. The report looks into shipments of calves and lambs to Israel for fattening and slaughtering. It concludes that animals are forced to live in hot and dirty conditions and are made to sit in their own excrement with insufficient ventilation. And worst of all, the ministry is doing nothing to ensure that complaints are followed up on. In 2018, a bill was in fact greenlit at the end of the year to stop live animal shipments, but since the Israeli parliament was dissolved for the first of 3 elections, the bill couldn't proceed earlier.
Now here's some very interesting news. As factories and businesses across the world cease to operate amidst the coronavirus pandemic, reports show that global air pollution has dramatically fallen. But will this last, and is it coincidence, or has the outbreak of COVID-19 truly made an enormous impact on our environment? Joining us to discuss is attorney Tami Ganot, the Director of Policy and Strategy at Adam Teva V'Din. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, to what degree to what degree has pollution changed?
Well, we can see across the board, across the globe, that greenhouse gases, for instance, have decreased significantly. But it should be said that other forms of pollution, such as plastic pollution from masks and single-use gloves, has actually risen during this time. So you can see there's a difference in pollution or in environmental impact. That in some cases it's beneficial. You can see a positive change, but then in others the change is not that positive. It's actually problematic.
How is the issue different, in terms of this pollution versus what we had before?
Well, a lot of the industrial work has actually ceased, like you mentioned. So we don't really we see less travel-related pollution, for instance. However, this stop or this lower pollution is temporary. It may take longer, but it's temporary. At some point, things will get back to normal. And on the other side, there is, like I mentioned before, the plastic pollution, but there is also a mentality issue that under the guise of the current crisis and the economic crisis that is expected to follow, that we are already starting to feel, that actually a lot of steps are being taken by decision makers to lower the burden, as they put it, on industry and polluters, and actually to go on deregulating environmental impacts. So we are actually concerned that the impact, the long-term impact, will be more pollution rather than less.
So right now people aren't going to stop wearing masks, nor should they, honestly. But so do you have any tips that can maybe help the public pollute less, both now and during the next few months as restrictions are lifted?
Well, absolutely. I think that there are two things, really, 2 points of view. First of all, we need to lower our impact. And of course, and I agree completely, health comes first. And you need to wear the masks, you need to wear the gloves where they protect you, according to the guidelines, absolutely. However, there is an environmental price. So first of all, of course, you need to throw them in the bright bin and not just around the streets. As you can see in Israel, around here, you can see just masks sometimes, like on the roadside and on the sidewalks. And you need to lower your use. I mean, really ask yourself, do you need to use now the gloves? Is it necessary? But moreover, and this is, I think, the biggest thing, is to change the way we behave looking forward. Right now, we are in a health crisis. It's a different mentality than the long term. So in the long term, we really need to lower our plastic pollution. And then the flip side of that, the positive side of that, is actually taking the benefits that we've learned we can have during this time and actually continue with them even after the corona is behind us.
All right, well, I'm all for less pollution. Tami, thank you so much for being with us right now.
Thank you.
In other news, Israelis trapped for years in the Gaza Strip may finally be released as Hamas and Israel reportedly inch closer to an agreement. It's been nearly a decade since the Gilad Shalit prisoner swap between Israel and Hamas. But for nearly half that time, the Hamas terror group in Gaza has been holding on to a number of other Israelis. Soldiers Oron Shaul and Hadar Goldin, who were killed in the 2014 Gaza war, and Israeli civilians Hisham al-Sayed and Avraham Mengistu, who wandered into Gaza before their capture. Well, now Israeli officials are expressing real optimism that these four can also soon be released in a prisoner swap agreement. In fact, top international diplomats from Switzerland, Germany, and Egypt have also been in contact as mediators between Hamas and Israel. And ex-Israeli Mossad officials who served in the Shalit deal explained that Hamas, from its perspective, is under massive pressure due to the coronavirus outbreak, and they worry that if the outbreak gets out of control, they'll be left without suitable medical equipment. But in spite of the potential good news, Israelis are waiting to hear the cost. In order to free Gilad Shalit in 2011, 1,027 Arab, Israeli, and Palestinian prisoners had to be released, a large majority of whom were imprisoned for violent acts of terror against Israelis. 280 were even serving life sentences, and scores of those released in the deal have since been rearrested for repeat offenses. Even now, the news of this potential deal comes just after rockets had been fired from Gaza into southern Israel, prompting swift Israeli response. Moving on to politics now, just a day remains before the deadline to approve of a unity deal. Top Israeli officials are now calling on the courts to keep out of the latest unity revisions. Attorney General Avichai Mandelblit is now telling the High Court of Justice not to interfere in the latest version of a unity coalition agreement between the Likud and the Blue and White parties. The two had signed a complex agreement necessitating several basic laws to be amended in order for it to pass. But just as soon as the ink had dried, 8 petitions against the potential government had been filed with the High Court, and the court has since concluded that 3 major clauses in the deal must be revised. Well, in less than 24 hours, Prime Minister Netanyahu's Likud party and Knesset Speaker Gantz's Blue and White have returned with a new agreement which thoroughly addresses the court's concerns. And Attorney General Mandelblit now writes that there is no reason to strike the new deal down, adding that intervention by the Honorable Court in coalition agreements should only be reserved for exceptional and rare cases. Now, of the 3 clauses that needed fixing, first was the 6-month freeze on non-coronavirus related laws, which has been changed to just giving coronavirus laws preference on the floor. Second is the freeze on senior appointments, which has been shortened from 6 months to 3. And third, the expansion to the so-called Norwegian law, which allows any MK appointed to the cabinet to be replaced by another party member down the list, has been scrapped altogether, though Blue and White MKs say that they'll pursue such legislation down the road. And here now with more on the final coalition talks is political strategist and director of English operations with the Yamina Party, Jeremy Sultan. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, there's just 1 day left before the final deal needs to pass through the Knesset. What do you predict is going to happen?
Well, if there's one thing we've learned from Israeli politics until now is that anything and everything can happen. My expectation is that we will see the signatures that are needed at some point before the deadline of the end of the 21 days. Whether the legislation will be completed or not, I think it'll be very difficult for Benny Gantz to argue that because the voting on the objections of the opposition had not been finalized, that he refused to go ahead and sign and hand over the mandate to Benjamin Netanyahu. What I think we will happen, though, and this is unfortunate for a lot of us who want to see a new government in Israel as soon as possible, is that I'm not even completely convinced that we'll have a new government next week either. We still have the 48 hours of President Rivlin validating the signatures. Then we have the beginning of a 14-day process of the actual Knesset mandate. Sure. And then following by that, you have another week until the actual vote. So this could take us potentially until June 1st.
All right, now what about the Yamina Party? Has Yamina started to change its mind maybe about joining the coalition?
It's, nothing's changed since the last time the two of us had a conversation. We're still waiting to see what the level of influence we would be having within this government, and we're also still waiting to see what the direction of this government is going to be.
All right, now my final question, you mentioned the High Court rulings, of course. Now, what are your thoughts about the High Court's actions this week and the new revised unity deal?
So I think if we're looking at the two deals that they're dealing with right now in the Supreme Court, the first case, whether Netanyahu has even any authority to go ahead and be the person who's mandated by the Knesset to form a coalition, I think that's a case the Supreme Court should have thrown out. It's very clear.
Well, it doesn't sound like they agreed with that petition either.
Yeah, look, if you read the basic law of the government, there are two terminologies that were used by those who petitioned, who you just do not see in basic law the government, and that is interim prime minister or serving prime minister, right? Rosh Hashanah Mekahen, or those type of things. It's just not written in law. They're creating legal concepts that don't exist in the law. That's not the way the law works. So in terms of the first case, I'm surprised they even heard it. In terms of the second case, look, there are many problematic changes we're looking at a coalition agreement that is looking to change not just basic law of the government, also basic law of the Knesset, also change a number of other regular non-basic laws.
Right.
But all of these legislative changes that are being done, when especially I'm hearing blue and white's representatives saying that they don't even fully comprehend what it was they signed on, I do find those stuff problematic. I don't think this is something that the court needs to go ahead and intervene on in all of its aspects, but there's a difference between judicial review of the executive branch and the legislative branch, for sure.
All right. Well, Jeremy, thank you so much for joining with us today.
Of course. Thank you.
Now, for many, business is just struggling to survive amidst the restrictions and lockdowns around the world. But for Israeli company Move It, payday has arrived in the form of a nearly $1 billion buyout. Most people who take public transportation are familiar with transit app Move It. The mobility as a service, or MaaS solutions company, helps 800 million users get around over 100 countries and in 45 languages, with its up-to-date navigation functions that tap into all the public transportation systems. And now, U.S. multinational company Intel has confirmed that it's acquiring Move It at a cost of just $900 million. But this also comes after Intel invested $50 million in Move It in 2018 and bought out driver assistance development company Mobileye in 2017, a deal that cost Intel $15.3 billion, the biggest acquisition in Israeli high-tech history. So what does that mean for the future of transportation? Well, in a statement released Monday, Intel explains that together, Move It and Mobileye will help achieve the plan to become a complete mobility provider, quote, including robo-taxi services estimated to be worth $160 billion by 2030. Now, for our final story tonight, COVID-19 is not yet gone, but we are starting to gain some ground in the fight against its spread. And so as restrictions are slowly lifting and life goes back to normal, we hit the streets to see what people had to say about it. ILTV's Nittany Manson has the scoop.
As you can see, it's a beautiful day out here in Tel Aviv, and with restrictions rolling back, we wanted to see what people had to say. How do you feel about restrictions being lifted?
It's really exciting to be outside and running, hopefully getting in the water soon, and to see the city come back to life.
The summer is coming, so everything's gonna be great. Look outside, so many people.
Do you think Israel's ready for restrictions to be lifted?
Yeah, I think so, but I think we're gonna have another wave. We just thought that it's better not to be back still, just be safe at home. I mean, we got used to the situation so far, so I guess we can handle like a month more.
Not sure that it's ready, but if we're going to do it, in steps, it will be the best things to do it.
No. No, I don't think so. Israel ready all the time.
Yes, but I'm nervous about the malls and the closed spaces, but I also understand that's related to easing the economy.
I don't know. Honestly, I think somehow we are kind of trying to forget what happened and coming back to normal.
There is another wave and we have to go to quarantine again. What's the one thing you would take with you for sure to quarantine this time?
Whoa, a job. Okay, it's gonna be really dorky, but more books.
Girlfriend.
A girlfriend or find a girlfriend?
No, my girlfriend. Already found her.
The sea and the beach. I took the beach and put in my apartment.
The gym.
My cat.
So then I have Wi-Fi to connect with my kids and my husband.
More art supplies.
Really missed all the coffee that I can buy now to take away. I wish I could have all this at home. Have it.
More weed. Smoke.
All right, well, let's take a look at the weather forecast. Skies are partly cloudy today in Tel Aviv with a high of 22 degrees Celsius or 72 Fahrenheit. But the sun should come out on Thursday just in time for the weekend, and the weather should be a bit warmer with a high of 24 degrees Celsius or 76 Fahrenheit. Now, before we go, let's take a look at what's going viral in Israel. Genius. I'm gonna have to take this home with my new dog because he will never let me cut his nails. So that's brilliant. All right, and that is it for today's news. Today's exchange rate is 3.51 shekels to the American dollar. For more news from ILTV, please like ILTV on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube and Roku TV pages. I'm Aaron Porras. Thank you so much for watching.